Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. And today we are going to talk about decisions, choices. Decisions. Some days the number of choices that we have to face is almost overwhelming. We have analysis by paralysis right now. We have so much information coming in. And we have so many different possibilities all around us. As consumers, we have an amazingly diverse array of options. Dozens of different breakfast cereals, automobiles, clothing, which movie to watch, and relaxation. There are dozens of cable television stations. There is so much on Netflix. There's so much. Just for me to pick a movie to watch or to choose what I'm going to watch next. Countless movies to even rent. There are so many decisions. It is amazing. And if you check out my book, The Reality Revolution, the mind-blowing movement to hack your reality, I talk about exploring physics and how your decisions pull you into parallel realities. So if it's true on a physics level that when you make a decision that another reality breaks off, then there is a certain energy that happens with decisions. I don't think that we're constantly moving into different realities, but decisions are the focal points of shifting into different realities. And the reason this is so important, check out Dolores Cannon when you get a chance. I have had episodes on this channel before, and the discussion of the new earth, the discussion that there is a new earth that is vibrationally forming. Check out my interview with Cindy Edison about the new earth. Check out the law of one material about shifting to fourth density and the harvest. So what's happening is sometimes there's something happening on a larger scale and your decisions matter. We're coming upon a point where you could be choosing to follow certain fears that could pull you into like a hellscape, a hell earth. Or if you make the right decisions, you can have heaven on earth. The 1,000 years of heaven that's talked about in the Bible is from decisions that you make in raising your own vibration. Every decision becomes so critical once we become tuned in to our multidimensional selves. Every decision. I started to really analyze every decision I made throughout the day, from what I was going to eat to when I was going to go out, because I was aware then, after having written that book, about these parallel realities and having experienced them. So there was a little phase for me of paralysis by analysis, especially for really big decisions. And when we look at reality transurfing, we learn there's imbalances in the energy that we're working with. And we also learn that in making a decision, there is a coordination that needs to occur with the heart and mind. So we're going to talk in this episode with some examples that I've learned from Edgar Cayce, from Joseph Murphy, from Vadim Zeland, on making decisions. And I think some of it's very interesting. Decisions we need to make aren't found only in the outer world. In our inner lives, we also have the opportunity to make choices every day, every thought. We can select attitudes to hold in mind toward life situations, and we can pick our feelings and motives. And some people I know can't make decisions. Watch The Good Place. One of the main characters is frozen by making decisions. Are you that person that has a hard time making decisions? Some people, they long for the less complicated life. A world in which they still have their freedom, but without so many options. To them, it seems as if spirituality might come more easily if so much time and attention weren't wasted on all the daily decisions. I know people like that just don't want to make decisions. They may even find themselves looking for a new lifestyle to simplify matters. Some people are so afraid of making decisions that they don't. And for other people, the problem is an anxiety that perhaps the right decisions are not being made. They wish for certainty, for signs from God that point one way or the other. These individuals sincerely want to follow a life path that is spiritually attuned, but sometimes they don't see clearly which choices will lead in that direction. So the question is, what is the will? The key to understanding decisions and decision making is the human will. Is the will the same as intention? What is the mysterious ingredient that allows us to make independent choices? If we make the right choices right now, as we go through this great awakening, if we make the right choices as described in the Dolores Cannon literature, it's a matter of choices, and it's like you're unveiling a layer of an onion as you shift into the new earth. And each decision you make, the key guiding principle in the Dolores Cannon work is fear. Are you making your decisions based on fear? Are you thinking about what you don't want to have happen out there? Are you talking about what you don't want to be happening or what you're afraid of happening? Are you holding the light? It sometimes seems almost ridiculous and funny how sometimes these choices are like you're in a movie or something. But continue to look at the really big choices you're being given, because I believe that God wants us to learn how to make decisions. That's what life is all about, is that we're learning how to make decisions. Those who believe that our lives are basically preconditioned claim that learning and habit patterns predetermine what happens to us. That the decision's already made. Others have recognized the existence of free will, but describe it in a limited way. Willpower that operates by grit and entails the suppression of desires. It's really interesting. I've been reading the Edgar Cayce readings. If you know who Edgar Cayce is, you can check out my previous episodes. Edgar Cayce, they called him the sleeping prophet. He would access the Akashic record in these deeply meditative states and give this incredible information. And so in the process, you see some psychology. People would ask questions to solve problems. And Edgar Cayce would also talk about the will and how to make decisions. So the psychology found in the Cayce readings offers a different point of view, one that deeply appreciates human volition, that the will is presented as one of the three attributes of the soul, along with the mind and spiritual energy. In other words, we are inviting to see ourselves function within the framework of a triad, the spiritual life energy, which is eternal and limitless, the mind, which is creative as it operates in all its capacities, including logic, intuition, imagination, and creativity, if those two things are separate, and the will, which gives us independent identity and freedom of choice. It's really interesting when you read the Law of One and the planet that they were on when they switched to their new Venus, essentially, when they harvested. 6 million people are all that made it. The other 32 million souls had to incarnate on other planets. The ones that shifted to the higher density are the ones that remain on the planet, according to that work. So it's interesting when you read that literature also, because they give a story about in this other planet, when they went through these same choices, that during that process, several of the people had figured out who they were and which path they wanted to go on. And that's kind of what we're doing. And when we're making these decisions, we're tuning into our soul's actual framework and architecture of who we are and what we're meant to be and what our purpose is. By talking about these three attributes, Casey challenges a philosophical and theological trend that is centuries old. Most great thinkers who have recognized the importance of the will have nevertheless described it as either a special type of energy or a particular quality of the mind. That is to say, by putting the will on an equal footing with mind and energy. And then Casey asks us to reconsider and appreciate just how important it really is. If that sounds too abstract and theoretical, think about this analogy. In working with colors, you quickly discover that there are 3 primary pigments: red, blue, and yellow. You can create any other color by properly mixing 2 or 3 of the basic building blocks. For example, orange is a combination of red and yellow. Brown is a mixture of all 3 primaries, but blue cannot be created by combining any other colors, nor can red and yellow. Thus, these 3 are fundamental elements, basic ingredients. In the same way, spiritual energy, mind, and will are the building blocks of the soul. According to Casey, will is not a state of mind or a type of energy. The quality it brings to the human experience is fundamental. But what is that quality? Italian psychiatrist Roberto Assagioli has been one of the few modern psychotherapists who has addressed the value of the will. And he founded an elaborate system of spiritual psychology called psychosynthesis, which places the will at the center of human individuality. That's the part that's making the decision. That's why we're talking about it. And in his book, The Act of Will, he describes 7 features that help us get a handle on how the will operates in our lives. Each feature represents a way of knowing ourselves or relating to the world around us, experiences that are missing when the will is unhealthy or inactive. So these features are vitality, access to dynamic energy, discipline and control, courageous initiative, patient persistence, focus, concentration, harmony, decision-making, and free choice. And the final item in this list is the most familiar, and unfortunately many theories on will, on reality, focus on only one aspect. But so many reality creation theories that you read really are ignoring the decision. And what is it that's choosing the realities, and why do entire universes get created when we make decisions? Essentially, the will gives us individuality. It's the opposer of habits. We all have strong habits, Yet by an act of will, we resist momentum and steer a new course when we have bad habits. And it develops the soul. The will, it develops the soul. It's indispensable in it. As Casey says, it's the whole ball game of the soul. It is the guider of the mind. As Casey calls it, the mind is the builder, and we're left to wonder what directs that building process. What is it that's directing our will? The will is the agent of obedience. When we hear "do your own thing," the notion of obedience doesn't sit well. We resist any influence that threatens our freedom. Even during plagues and pandemics, we resist our freedoms being taken away. But obedience to God's will is also a factor in spiritual growth. To surrender one's own power and follow a higher purpose, it's an act of enlightened will. And so the question then comes to mind, the difference between individual and divine will. Now, divine will might appear to contradict all previous points about human independence. And why should we concern ourselves with freedom and personal responsibility if ultimately there is a right way to which we must conform? Casey says that we must try to live with that paradox. That there are two sides of the will, one that is personally empowering and another that comes from beyond ourselves. So we have these two portions of our will. The will of God is not merely a set of required choices, a mandatory roadmap that forbids detours. This traditional view is too limiting. No wonder that so many sincere seekers have rejected the familiar images offered by generations, by traditional religions. A new view of higher will suggests that God wants us to learn how to use our freedom and exercise our independent nature, but in a way that benefits ourselves and others. This point is illustrated in the story of a woman who faced painful choices in dealing with one of her children. The youngster was having problems in many areas, and any approach that seemed to offer possibilities for improvement also carried an equal threat that things could become worse for the child. So for many weeks, the mother had confided in several friends and shared her confusion over the dilemma. She had prayed daily for guidance, hoping to get clear direction on what course to follow with her daughter. Yet God seemed to be silent on this issue. One day at a gathering with some of her friends who knew about the problem, she declared, "I know the will of God in this situation." That pronouncement quickly got everyone's attention, and all were eager to hear the divine revelation. The mother's next words were a surprise to them, but demonstrated profound wisdom about how God often works in our lives. "The will of God is," she paused, "that I decide. That I decide." This simple affirmation is often the key to God's will. The Creator wants us to learn how to make choices, decisions that are based on love and wisdom. Until we learn to exercise freedom of choice, we can never develop into the conscious, co-creative companion that God desires. Is God going to let you become God if you don't even know how to make a decision? Your own individualized God with your own universe if you can't make a decision? So this process of making decisions is part of the lesson of this density and this incarnation that you're in now. That I decide. Certainly we'll make mistakes along the way. We'll think that some of our decisions are motivated through love and insight, only to find out by the results of those choices that subtle, even unconscious forces clouded our vision. You know when you've made a choice what it really was about, but you'll sometimes justify it with other things. But we can learn from those errors. In fact, how else can we grow? Don't be afraid to make the decision. And that is what I see a lot of times. We observe the same process as a child matures through adolescence and emerges as an independent, responsible adult without the freedom to make decisions and sometimes mistakes. There is little hope for healthy development. The loving parent not only allows freedom of choice, but encourages and sometimes requires it. And so it's your will that is making this decision. So you need to go through a process and journey to understand your will. Awakening the will is what we need to do, awakening the proper divine will within us. There is a second reason that God wants us to learn to make decisions related to the familiar state in which we find the human will. Symbolically speaking, our wills are usually asleep. Most of the time, they slumber, and we allow habit patterns and hypnotic programming and forces in the outside world and pendulums to control us. By learning to make decisions ourselves instead of letting pendulums and outside forces make them for us, we awaken the will from its sleep. Casey often emphasized the significance of independent decision-making when he clairvoyantly counseled people when he was accessing the Akashic record about their predicaments. One young man was perplexed about how to get ahead in his career. He had recently visited a psychic medium and received the prophecy that someday a great benefactor would come into his life and financially pave the way for his success. Perhaps the news sounded too good to be true, so in his reading, he asked Casey for confirmation of this future event, and the answer dismayed him. He told that the future is not predetermined. There may be probabilities and likelihoods, but everything depends on how each individual uses his or her free will. If the young man made proper decisions along the way, then such a benefactor might someday come into life, but there were no guarantees. Destiny is a matter of what one does with the opportunities at hand. If you go back to my episodes on transurfing, where I talk about the alternative space or the space of variations, that is the vast quantum field, the quantum field which is referred to by Dr. Joe Dispenza, or what Quasi calls in his book the all space, and I talk about in my book. This space that doesn't necessarily have a place but is a path of the future is where all the different choices exist, all the possibilities exist. And all those possibilities already are created, as we know from what Neville Goddard discusses, that all of these different realities are already created. God had a joyous time creating so many different possibilities for you, unlimited possibilities. We are just selectors of those realities. What we're doing is we're making a decision every thought. We're making a decision with every thought. And when we decide to control our reality, then everything is going to change. This idea that the future is not predetermined is also discussed throughout the Transurfing book. That's why Even though astrology can be accurate, or the tarot can be accurate, it's only accurate of a portion of the alternative space. There's still those other possibilities. So it's not predetermined. And by doing that, you can create and pull yourself into that reality by becoming aware of that prophecy. So oftentimes I don't want to know, but that's my own opinion, and everybody has their own choice with how they interact with prophetic material. And this point of view kind of resembles closely the one offered by Rudolf Steiner, another theosophist very much like Manly P. Hall, regarding human relationships. Steiner indicated that we may be destined to meet certain key individuals at particular points in our lives, meetings that are really the result of decisions made as souls, even before our physical births. However, once such a meeting takes place, destiny is at an end. What remains is what we make of the opportunity with our free will. Think about how this principle might apply in your own life. Perhaps you were destined to meet your spouse, your boss, and other significant people. But what is the quality of those relationships now? It's a matter not of destiny, but how you have chosen to think, to feel, and act toward those individuals. It may not please you to hear the notion that your will is usually asleep. No one likes to think he or she is out to lunch or out of touch with what's going on in life. But how many of your decisions are made by habit? How many? Do you have decisions that you're making out of habit? And this idea of the importance of your decisions, it might make you a little bit uncomfortable. A little bit of careful self-observation will probably prove the point. Very rarely in the course of a day are you likely to pause and use your will. You may seem to make choices, but more often than not, those decisions are automatic reactions, unconscious compulsions to follow old habit patterns. Circumstances probably dictate most of the direction to your typical day. Here is a good way to test this premise. First thing in the morning, pick 3 goals you want to accomplish. Each one should maybe take a little bit of initiative on your part. The activities that aren't going to be completed. If you merely go with the flow of the day, then as the day progresses, watch how easily you can get sidetracked from your intentions. For example, your mood may change. The enthusiasm and determination you felt in the morning fade as you get hungry or tired. People in your life expect you to do other things that day. Unexpected circumstances arise. You may find that your will to accomplish your goals falls asleep, and that you end up letting life around you determine how you'll use your time and energy. That was me for 30 years, wanting to write a book and then just losing my energy and enthusiasm. Of course, sometimes you'll be successful with this experiment. You may find a careful balance between commitments that you've made to your goals and unanticipated needs of others. Absolute dedication to either course is an unhealthy exercise of will. On the one hand, you can become too rigid and stubborn in your insistence on fulfilling your own agenda. And on the other hand, you can become so compliant to the demands of life around you that your personal will falls asleep once again, as is often the case on the spiritual path. The best way is a middle ground between those extremes. And where does the will of God fit into all of this? The divine intention is that we learn to make loving and wise choices. In so doing, we develop our individualities and awaken from a symbolic sleep. However, it is just as essential to learn how to surrender to something bigger than ourselves. This is the paradox of spiritual power. We must exercise our freedom of choice, and in so doing grow in personal strength. But we must also be able to give it all up and surrender to a higher power. How can we learn to surrender when we make decisions? What does that mean? How can we give ourselves to God? When you hear that, it sounds ridiculous. How do I give myself without feeling that we are giving up or giving in? The very idea of surrender connotes submission or capitulation. Who wants to be weak or a wimp? Sometimes that language will evoke that in you. Once you have a deeper understanding of the dual nature of the will and its importance to spiritual growth, we can focus on making day-to-day choices. Even though the topic of will encompasses much more than decision-making, that's generally where we face the issue most often and most directly. The making of a decision is a three-step process that is influenced by the timing of the sequence and the intensity we feel at various stages of the progression. First of all, confusion. In moments when we initially face a choice, there's usually a feeling of confusion or ambiguity. Otherwise, we really wouldn't face a decision. Without some degree of disorientation, the situation would simply be an imperative awaiting implementation. The confusion we encounter in the face of a real decision is produced by the competing voices of the alternatives. One voice promises a certain outcome. Another warns against the first and offers its own picture of the best course. It might be easier to reach a decision if only two voices competed, but often there are several. Just remember that it's okay to be confused. It's natural and even healthy. People who never get bewildered probably aren't growing very much. The confusion can indicate that former ways of seeing life are giving way to new understandings. From among all the possibilities, you'll have a chance to create your future with your decision. Not every voice that speaks during the first step will propose a viable course of action. A preliminary level of decision making must take place at this second step, one that narrows the field to a few serious candidates. Sometimes the will can be used skillfully at this stage to combine two or more similar alternatives and thereby create a new option. This is the stage, and the final stage is choosing the option, and this is the stage at which the choice is made. Even though more than one alternative may be appealing, your will makes it possible to focus on only one and commit your energies to it. That decision doesn't have to be forever, but for the time being, it must exclude any competing options. Your decision should be one of commitment to action. By your choice, you say to yourself, and often to the outside world, here's what I think is best. I'm going to act on my choice and walk some steps down that path. I'll be watching for results and may need to alter my course later, but for now, this is my intention. As simple as this three-step process may sound, there are still some pitfalls. One is to rush the sequence. This is especially a problem if we believe that it's wrong or unspiritual to be confused. In our haste to reach a decision, we may not give ourselves a chance to find the best alternative and thus end up recreating the themes and patterns of our past. Another pitfall is to get stuck at the first or second stage. We may get mired in the confusion, never emerging from what started out as a healthy examination of alternatives. Or we may get so caught up in the identification of all those choices that we never get around to deciding on just one. So it's just those 3 steps: confusion, alternative space, the alternatives and possibilities, and then the choice. Those 3 steps. Those are the steps that are involved in a decision and making that choice. And with patience and understanding, we can carefully, consciously move through those 3 steps with any decision we face. The amount of time necessary will vary. If it's a medical emergency, will create a moment of panic and confusion. However, one must recognize the alternative course of action and choose one fairly quickly. The sequence may be completed in a matter of seconds. By contrast, the person who is going through a divorce could be delayed in making a decision for weeks or months. Sometimes it's tempting to grab the first alternative that comes along. But with courage, one can allow the time necessary for several options to present themselves more clearly. When one finally arrives at a choice, the decision may have been months or even years in the making. No matter how short or long the time required, decisions are undoubtedly exciting. The freedom to choose allows us to feel alive. What a privilege. That many other dimensions of consciousness don't allow as much liberty as we experience in the physical world. In many of the realms Casey talks about, to which we may pass after bodily death, we live out the consequences of decisions we made during our earthly lives, but without as much direct access to free will. Souls often reincarnate into the physical world to reconnect with their wills and make needed changes. Take the time to appreciate this extraordinary spiritual gift. Your will is the key to your future. God wants you to use it to make wise and loving decisions. Joseph Murphy says the key to your health, wealth, prosperity, and success in life lies in your wonderful capacity to make decisions. The great Joseph Murphy, who wrote The Power of the Subconscious Mind, talks about how to make choices. He says the greatest discovery you can make is to awaken to the great truth that there is an infinite wisdom and power already established within you, enabling you to solve all your problems and to become wealthy, happy, joyous, and free. You were born to win, and you are equipped with all the powers of God within you to make you master of your fate and captain of your destiny. If you are not aware of your capacity to choose from the kingdom of heaven within you, which is the presence of God lodged in your deeper mind, you will begin to choose and make decisions based on events, circumstances, and conditions around you. What is worse, you will tend to overlook the powers within you and will exalt the powers of circumstance which may exist at a certain time. Choose from the kingdom of God within you and move forward on the high road to happiness, health, freedom, and the joy of living the abundant life. The power of choice. Your power to choose is your most distinctive quality and your highest prerogative. Your capacity to choose and to initiate what is chosen reveals your power to create. An alcoholic, by which I mean a compulsive drinker, visited Dr. Joseph Murphy, and he explained to him that he had the God-given capacity to choose sobriety, peace of mind, happiness, and prosperity right here and right now. and he was sincere in his desire to become free from what he called his curse. So, Dr. Joseph Murphy gave him the following prayer: I choose health, peace of mind, freedom, and sobriety right now. This is my decision. I know that the almighty power backs up my choice. I am relaxed, and God's river of peace flows through me. My spiritual food and drink are God's ideas and eternal verities which unfold within me, bringing me harmony, health, peace, and joy. In my imagination, I am back with my family doing what I love to do and am divinely happy. Whenever the urge to drink comes, I flash this mental movie in my mind, and the God power backs me up. And I agree with Dr. Joseph Murphy. You can make this choice, and it took me a very long time to learn that. Sometimes you fall into your addiction and you think that you can't get out of it. But it is just a choice. As the Bible gives us in Joshua 24:15, choose you this day whom ye will serve. Murphy says this guy repeated this prayer 4 or 5 times a day, while being aware that he was writing these thoughts in his subconscious mind, which accepts repeated thought patterns, affirmed convincingly and decisively. The shakes and the jitters still came occasionally, but he flashed on the screen of his mind the mental movie and vision of himself at home with his wife and family, working at his former profession. His desire to give up the bad habit was greater than his desire to continue it, and the power of his subconscious backed him up. Every morning, when you awake, choose the following eternal truths. Remember that your lifetime experiences, conditions, and circumstances are the sum total of your choice. Affirm boldly as follows, as Dr. Murphy states, say these words: Today is God's day. I choose harmony, peace, perfect health, divine law and order, divine love, beauty, abundance, security, and inspiration from on high. I know as I claim these truths in my life that I awaken and activate the powers of my subconscious, which compel me to express all these powers and qualities. I know it is as easy for God to become all these things in my life as it is to become a blade of grass. I give thanks that this is so. The statement should be the choice of every person every day. These are the principles of life, and as you affirm them, you make all these powers of God active and potent in your life. Your subconscious accepts what you consciously believe, and it is easy for you to believe in the principles of harmony, peace, beauty, love, joy, and abundance. Emerson said, "Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles. There is a principle of beauty, but none of ugliness. There is a principle of harmony, but none of discord. There is a principle of love, none of hatred. There is a principle of joy, none of sadness. There is a principle of opulence and abundance, none of deprivation and poverty. There is a principle of right action, none of wrong action. Begin to choose what is true of God, and His goodness and the riches of life will be yours." People who are afraid to make choices are actually refusing to recognize their own divinity. For God indwells all men. We've talked about it in the Neville Goddard lectures. Joseph Murphy talks about it. It is your divine right to make choices based on eternal verities and the great principles of life which never change. Choose to be healthy, happy, prosperous, and successful because you have dominion over your world of finance, business, health, profession, and relationships with others. Your subconscious mind is subject to the decrees and convictions of your conscious mind, and whatever you decree convincingly shall come to pass. The Bible says, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Galatians 6:7. What happens when you fail to choose? A woman told Dr. Murphy the story, "I don't know what to choose or what is reasonable or logical." He explained to her that she had made a choice. She had chosen not to choose, which meant that she had chosen to take what comes from the mass mind or the law of averages in which we are all immersed. Also, if she had chosen not to choose, the random or irrational mind of the multitude would choose for her, inasmuch as she refused to choose for herself. She began to perceive that it is very foolish for her not to choose thoughts, images, and ideals for herself, that she was here to do her own thinking, reasoning, and choosing. Otherwise, the mind of the masses would do her choosing for her and manipulate her mind along undesirable lines. She reversed her attitude and asserted constructively, "I am a choosing, volitional being. I have the power, the ability, and the wisdom to control and to direct my own mental and spiritual processes. I say to myself every morning when I awaken, God indwells me. What am I going to choose today from the treasure house of infinity within me? I choose peace, divine guidance, right action in my life, and decree that goodness, truth, and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalm 23:6. Following this manner of choice, this woman transformed her life. She had better health, increased efficiency, and more understanding, and prospered along all lines. You are a self-conscious individual, and as you know, you have the capacity to choose. After deliberation, you select one suit of clothes in preference to another. So what I do is I wear a black shirt that I love that fits me perfect, so I don't have to make that choice every morning. What things are you making a choice for every day? Does it take you a long time with? Does it take you a long time to make a choice? Why did Steve Jobs only wear one pair of clothing? Why do all those CEOs do that? They have one pair of clothing that they wear because they realize the power of their decisions. In like manner, you choose your minister, doctor, dentist, home, wife, husband, food, and car. In other words, you are constantly being called upon to choose in this third density plane. What kind of thoughts and images are you choosing? That's the first choice. Your whole life represents the sum total of your choices. Choose wisely, judiciously, and constructively. Choose the truths which never change. They are the same yesterday, today, and forever, the truths of God. And some say, "I will let God choose for me." When you say that, you mean a God outside yourself. God, or the living Spirit, is omnipresent and is also within you, the very life of you. The only way God or infinite intelligence will work for you. It's through you. In order for the universal to act on the individual plane, it must become the individual. You are here to choose. You have volition and initiative. This is why you are an individual. Accept your divinity and your responsibility and choose for yourself. Make decisions for yourself. The other person or your relative does not know best. When you refuse to choose for yourself, you are actually rejecting your divinity and your divine prerogatives, and you are thinking from the standpoint of a slave, a serf, and an underling. Do you need to call somebody else to help you make a decision? Sometimes I think that's a mistake, because you're not listening to your own voice. If they have knowledge that you don't have, then maybe. But accept their information, and in a second I'll talk about the heart and mind. I was going to say there's another story that Dr. Murphy gives. A widow came to him perplexed, baffled, and frustrated because she had a choice to make between two men and could not make up her mind which one to marry. He told her an old story about the donkey placed at the central point between two stacks of hay, and he starved to death because he could not make a choice as to which one was his food for the day. He suggested that she had the capacity and ability to choose infinite intelligence within her, to lead and guide her, and that its nature was responsiveness. He advised her that the answer would come to her clearly and that it would be impossible for her to miss it. Accordingly, on going to sleep that night, she spoke to her higher self, "Father, you are all wise. Reveal to me the answer and show me the way I should go. I give thanks for the right answer, for I know you know only the answer." She had a dream that night in which both of the above-mentioned men said goodbye to her. Then a third man, her employer, appeared in the dream and asked her to marry him. She knew the answer, and when she awoke, and the very next day her boss asked her to marry him, which offer she accepted. She followed the biblical injunction, "Choose you this day whom you will serve," Joshua 24:15. Turn to the infinite intelligence within you and call upon it, and you will receive the joy of the answered prayer. You can choose confidence, riches, and a full life. Many say that they have always experienced sickness, failure, frustration, and loneliness. All these failures can be dissolved by choosing to believe in the one infinite healing presence. Feeling and emotion follow thought. You can therefore choose to build a new emotional life. Recognize that the will of God for you is the tendency of the life principle itself, which seeks to flow through you as harmony, health, peace, joy, creative ideas, and prosperity, extending beyond your fondest dreams. You have chosen to believe what is true of God is true of you. Therefore, from this moment forward, the preponderance of your thought and expectancy will come from Him who giveth to all life, breath, and all things. In other words, your mind and heart will be always open for the influx of God's riches now and forevermore. The place where I learned the most about making decisions that helped me the most in my recent life, that has proven to be the most powerful, is reality transurfing. In reality transurfing, you're given the concept of aligning the heart and mind. That when you're making a decision, essentially you are competing with two different powers. One of them is your heart and your mind. Your mind is thinking through what it wants to do, but your heart does not speak the language of your mind. Your heart is what is connected to the alternative space that has all the information about all the possibilities. It is the smarter part of you that has access to those future possibilities, but it will only communicate with you through energy and feelings. So the technology that I find interesting is understanding transurfing as a way of making decisions when you understand parallel realities. Decisions can induce you into lifelines that have energies that are terrible. So your decisions end up helping you to choose and select which lifelines that you end up on. Zealand explains the signals of the heart are conveyed as an ambiguous premonition, which we call the inner voice. In moments when the mind is distracted, it allows you to experience the feelings and knowledge of the heart. This is the rustle of the morning stars, the voice without words, reflection without thought, and sound without volume. When you hear this music, you know that you have understood something, but it still has an elusive quality. Do not think so much, feel and listen to your intuition. Everyone knows what intuition is. Everyone has sometime had the feeling that someone is about to arrive just before a visitor appears at the door. Has had the feeling that something is going to happen and then it does. Or has had the feeling that they simply know something that requires no explanation. The mind is constantly generating thoughts, and the voice of the heart is literally drowned out by the thought churn, making it difficult to access intuitive knowledge, Zealand explains. He goes on to say, if you stop the train of thoughts and simply contemplate the emptiness, you will hear the rustle of the morning stars, the inner voice that has no words. The heart could provide answers to many of our questions, if only we could hear its voice. It is quite difficult to deliberately attune to unrealized sectors of the information field, and to force your mind to listen to what the heart is trying to convey. So we will begin slowly. The heart has two quite clearly discernible states, comfort and discomfort. The mind has designations for these states. I feel good, and I do not feel good. I feel confident, and I am anxious. I like it, and I do not like it. At every step we take in life, we have to decide whether to do one thing or another. The thing we call life emerges when parts of the alternative space or space of variations are transformed into physical reality. Depending on our thoughts and actions, one sector or another is realized on the material level. The heart has access to the information field, and somehow the heart is given to see what lies ahead in as yet unrealized but impending sectors. When the soul has set its sights on a sector that has not yet been realized in the physical, it knows what to expect and whether it will be an unpleasant or pleasant experience. The mind interprets these feelings as vague sensations of inner peace or the lack of it. The soul often knows what lies ahead and tries patiently to communicate what it knows to the mind, but the mind hardly hears the voice or attributes very little meaning to the vague premonition. The mind is hooked by pendulums, preoccupied solving problems, and convinced by the reasonableness of its actions. The mind makes resolute decisions, guided by logical reasoning and common sense. As we know, though, sensible reasoning is no guarantee of an ideal solution. Unlike the mind, the heart is rarely mistaken because it does not think. It feels and knows. How often do we hear people claim post factum, "I knew nothing good would come of it"? The task is to learn to interpret what the heart is trying to communicate to the mind at the time a decision is being made. It is not difficult. All you have to do is instruct your inner guardian to pay attention to your inner state before making a final decision. Your mind is usually trapped by pendulums or absorbed with the job of solving various problems. To hear the rustle of the morning stars, it is enough to simply remember to note your inner condition. It sounds quite banal and commonplace, but it works. On the Dolores Cannon episode that I had, that we removed, I might redo it, on the council. She interviews somebody from the council, which rules the solar system and helped create it. And they explained that the biggest problem on Earth is that we are not following our heart. We're disconnected from our heart. So reality transurfing is kind of like this technology of using your heart in a way that aligns with your mind. And when you start to do it, you start to see outside changes. If you want to see outside changes of your reality, you have to align your heart and mind, or it will never happen. And this was a huge realization for me when I was struggling and nothing was working, and I didn't believe in it anymore. The only problem is in paying attention to your feelings and sensations. People tend to be more inclined to trust arguments based on reason than their own feelings, and so have forgotten how to pay attention to their own inner condition and the feeling of integrity that inner peace gives. In the moment of considering a possible solution to a problem, the mind is guided by sensible reasoning, not by feelings. In fact, the moment of decision making, the mind is unlikely to even notice that there are such things as feelings. If, however, you have been able to remember, then take the next step and note, what are you feeling? Start asking yourself what you're feeling when you're making these decisions. There might be something about a situation that puts you on your guard or worries you. There might be something you do not like about a situation. Once you have made a decision, ask the mind to be quiet for a moment and ask yourself how you feel about it, good or bad. Then imagine having made a different decision and ask yourself the question again, how does this make me feel, good or bad? If you cannot pick up on a clear feeling when you do this, it suggests your mind is still not very good at listening. Instruct your inner guardian to alert you to your inner state more often. On the other hand, it may be that the question itself is ambiguous, in which case it is better not to make a decision based on vague information. In this case, you can rely on the judgment of your mind or simplify the question. If you get a clear sense of, yes, I feel good about this, or no, I don't feel good about this, then you have clearly heard the rustle of the morning stars. Now you know the answer to your question. It does not mean that you will necessarily act according to the dictates of the heart, for we are not always free to act as we would wish to, but at least you will know what to expect from a sector which has not yet been transformed into physical reality. The other thing in transurfing that's important to be aware of is when Zealand talks in another chapter about the alternatives flow. And this has also helped me. Oftentimes you'll make the decision of the harder thing because you think that's what you're supposed to do. But there is a flow to your decisions. When you think about decisions by themselves, it's one thing, but usually there's a flow of cause and effect. And so Zealand works out how to deal with this flow really well. He explains, metaphorically speaking, this is how the fighter moves with the flow of life. pendulums provoke the fighter, who then swims against the current, not understanding that it would be easier and more advantageous to use the flow. The fighter's mind is gripped by pendulums, but the fighter is resolutely set on battle, and by making resolute decisions, whips the water with all his might in places where calm, smooth movements would have sufficed. Now imagine a person who neither goes against the flow, causing additional eddies in the water, nor lets the current carry them utterly like a little paper boat. They would be intentionally moving in harmony with the flow, noting the sandbanks, obstacles, and dangerous areas along the way, making smooth movements to keep to their chosen course. This is the person at the helm. How useful is it to think of life in terms of flow, and why is it so injurious to swim passively or try to resist the flow? The information that lies in the alternative space is stationary, like a matrix. At the same time, though, the information structure is organized into chains of cause and effect, which give birth to the flow of alternatives. This is what we mean when we talk about the flow in the context of transurfing. The main reason to avoid actively resisting the flow is that in doing so, you can expend huge amounts of energy, either in vain or to your own detriment. Neither can you rely entirely on the alternative's flow, for it could carry you into a calm lagoon as easily as to the edge of a waterfall. One should therefore proceed with a sense of caution, correcting one's movements with smooth actions. A person should also be aware of the general direction of the flow, which is determined by their chosen goal and the means of achieving it. Once the general course has been determined, one should rely on the flow as far as possible. Everyone has a rough sense of the general flow of events in their life. Most people first study, then get a job, have a family, work their way up to the employment ladder, build a house, and so on. Many people make a lot of mistakes along the way in retrospect, wishing they had done things differently. But it is too late to change anything. What is done is done. The flow takes them in a direction far away from their goal, and the rational mind is powerless to do anything about it. All they can do is regret, knowing that if only they had known where they would fall, they would have put something there to soften the landing. Everyone wants to know what awaits them just around the corner. Not everyone is serious about turning to fortune tellers and astrologers for advice, but many are interested in them, at least out of curiosity. The advantage of a reading is that an optimistic astrological forecast or prediction can light a spark, whereas an unpleasant prediction can be trivialized as meaningless and later forgotten. Despite the fact that astrological calculations and clairvoyance cannot guarantee 100% accuracy, the transurfing model does not negate their value, because prediction and sight are sourced in the alternative space. In any case, if the accuracy rate was too low, no one would take these translunary predictions seriously. The main question that arise are to what extent we can surrender ourselves to the flow, how to determine whether we are going in the right direction, and why we should surrender ourselves to it at all. As we mentioned previously, the mind is constantly under pressure from projected levels of importance, and so hindered from making truly efficient decisions. Inner and outer importance is essentially the main source of the problem, causing balanced forces to manifest in the form of rapids and whirlpools along the person's path. So if you're making decisions that are related to your importance, or the decision is important in any way, you may be making the wrong decision. And that is just figure in the concept of importance. If you reduce the intensity of projected importance, the flow will return to a calmer current. The question of whether one should surrender oneself is also important. Outer importance encourages the mind to look for complicated solutions to simple problems. Inner importance convinces the mind that its reasoning is sound and capable of making only right decision. If we reduce intensity of projected importance, the mind can breathe freely because it has been released from the influence of pendulums and the pressure of artificially created problems. It can make more objective, appropriate decisions. The beauty of this lies in the fact that once the mind is free of the burden of importance, it has no great need for powerful intellect. Of course, to solve everyday problems, you need logical thinking, knowledge, and analytical skill. But this requires much less energy. The flow of alternatives is a luxurious gift, which paradoxically the mind hardly ever uses. The alternatives flow contains the solutions to all of our problems. The majority of problems are in fact artificially created by the mind. Pendulums prod the anxious mind, which sets about solving all sorts of problems just to try and keep the situation under control. Its willful decisions are for the most part pointless, like randomly slapping your hands on the surface of the water. The majority of problems, particularly minor problems, resolve themselves if the alternatives flow is allowed to take its course. There's no essential need for a powerful intellect if the solution to a problem already exists in the alternative space. The optimum solution will appear of its own accord, as long as we do not go rooting around in the debris, interfering with the alternative's flow. Optimality is a principle that is inherent in the structure of the information field. Chains of cause and effect create separate streams in the flow. These streams represent the best possible ways in which cause and effect can move. Everything exists in the alternative space, but it is the optimal or most energy efficient alternative that is more likely to be realized. Nature never wastes energy, which is why people walk with their feet and not their ears. All processes strive to move along paths which are most energy efficient, so the alternative streams are organized along the path of least resistance. This is where the optimal solution to any problem lies. The mind is constantly losing a sense of the flow because it is influenced by pendulums, conspiracy theories, weird stories in the news and outside stuff, and acts in their interests. In other words, the mind gets caught up in a maze, looking for complicated solutions to simple problems. All these abstract notions may appear overly conjectural. However, you can try out some of the ideas in transurfing or that I talk about on the podcast, and then decide whether you think this flow exists. As Zealand says, the alternatives flow is a truly sumptuous gift for the mind. The keys to any problem are encoded within it. To access them, you have to learn to move in the direction of least resistance. As a rule, people look for complicated solutions because they perceive the problem as an obstacle. And as we know, obstacles can only be overcome by applying much effort. It helps get into the habit of choosing the simplest possible solution to any given problem. Now, I repeat that. I read that in transurfing and I started applying that. And I had these amazingly simple solutions to stuff that would come up. We all have to learn something new at some point, or think about how we can do familiar tasks in a more effective way. One approach to doing things in the most efficient manner is so simple it is hard to believe it actually works. In accordance with the principle of harmonious movement, everything should be done by the easiest and simplest means possible. Make that your choice. The most optimal alternatives to any action are organized in streams, which are like chains comprised of links, which represent optimal cause and effect. Deciding to take the next step in a given action is like choosing the next link in the chain. It is a matter of deciding which link is a part of the stream. What normally happens, though, is that a person makes a logical decision based on what they think would be the most correct based on their day-to-day experience of life. The mind makes willful decisions believing that it is capable of calculating and explaining anything. But this is not true. You can probably recall many occasions when you have suddenly seen how things could have been done differently, and yet it was too late. It is not that the mind is scattered or lacking in sharpness so much as that the chain in the stream does not always correspond to logical construction. However meticulous you are, you will rarely choose an optimal action relying solely on logic. Generally speaking, the mind is always under some kind of pressure, be it stress, anxiety, depression, or heightened activity. In other words, the mind is constantly distracted by pendulums, which make it a little bit pushy or prepared to launch an attack on the outside world. In order to choose the next chain in the stream, all you have to do is free yourself from the puppet strings and have enough compliance to follow the flow. This means adopting a condition of balance and having enough mindfulness not to project inflated importance. Once you feel that you are in a condition of balance and harmony with the world, just follow the flow. You will notice a multitude of signs that will guide you. Let go of the situation. Be the objective observer rather than the participant. Perform your actions simply adopting neither the position of slave nor master. Instruct your inner guardian to nudge you every time your mind tries to make a sensible but nonetheless willful decision. Detach yourself emotionally as you were simply an administrator and observe your work from the outside. Everything can be done a lot more simply than you think. Yield to that simplicity. It is the mind, not the alternatives flow, that carries you to the edge of the waterfall. The mind interprets information using a set of established designations. The heart does not think or speak, it feels and knows. The mind is only capable of building a relatively new version of a house from old bricks. Fundamentally new discoveries originate in unrealized sectors of the alternative space. The heart serves as a medium between new information and the mind. The heart perceives unrealized information as knowledge beyond interpretation. A discovery is made when the mind is able to interpret information accessed by the heart. The mind is capable of perfectly assessing one's level of inner comfort. Learn to pay attention to your inner state. By foregoing the projection of importance, you are free to choose your destiny. Freedom of choice means being free not to ask, demand, or fight for what you want, but simply to go out and get it. The information structure is organized in chains of cause and effect. And the chains of cause and effect generate the alternatives flow. Paths of least resistance are organized into separate streams. The streams in the flow contain the solution to all our problems. So we need to move harmoniously with the flow. And so this gives you another point of helping you to make decisions, going through that process of confusion into making a decision. And then in this process, to access your feelings and become more aware of them. Also, check out my episode on intuition where I go into more detail about following your intuition. And now, to end this, I'd like to share some of those affirmations and prayers given by Dr. Joseph Murphy when he was talking about choice and making a decision. You can use these when you begin the day or when you end it, but by regularly doing it, you can integrate it into your thinking mind. I choose health, peace of mind, freedom right now. This is my decision. I know that the almighty power backs up my choice. I am relaxed and God's river of peace flows through me. My spiritual food and drink are God's ideas and eternal verities which unfold with me, bringing harmony, health, peace, and joy. In my imagination, I am doing what I love to do and am divinely happy. Whenever I have the urge to do something against my own will, I flash this mental movie in my mind and God's power backs me up. Father, you are all wise. Reveal to me the answer and show me the way I should go. I give thanks for the right answer, for I know you know only the answer. I am a choosing volitional being. I have the power, the ability, and the wisdom to control and direct my own mental and spiritual processes. I say to myself every morning when I awaken, God indwells me. What am I going to choose today from the treasure house of infinity within me? I choose peace, divine guidance, right action in my life, and decree that goodness, truth, and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I know that my good is this very moment. I believe in my heart that I can prophesy for myself harmony, health, peace, and joy. I enthrone the concept of peace, success, and prosperity in my mind now. I know and believe these thoughts and seeds will grow and manifest themselves in my experience. I am the gardener. As I sow, so shall I reap. I sow godlike thoughts and plant seeds. These wonderful seeds are peace, success, harmony, and goodwill. It is a bountiful and wonderful harvest. From this moment forward, I am depositing in the universal bank my subconscious mind, seeds or thoughts of peace, confidence, poise, and balance. I am drawing out the fruit of the wonderful seeds I am depositing. I believe and accept the fact that my desire is a seed deposited in the subconscious. I make it real by feeling the reality of it. I accept the reality of my desire in the same manner. I accept the fact that the seed deposited in the ground will grow. I know it grows in the darkness. Also, my desire or ideal grows in the darkness of my subconscious mind. In a little while, like the seed, it comes above the ground, becomes objectified as a condition, circumstance, or event. Infinite intelligence governs and guides me in all ways. I meditate on whatsoever things are true, honest, just, lovely, and of good report. I think on these things, and God's power is with my thoughts of good. I am at peace. So what decision do you have to make? That's what this was all about. Your decisions are important. Take them into account. Become aware of them and follow the things I talked about in this teaching. Some great affirmations that you can use on a regular basis, and become aware of the process of your decision making and follow your heart. Become attuned to your will. Become attuned to that part of you that is making these decisions, and you become attuned to your higher self. I hope that this helped you out. I find it to be a big part of the reality creation process. Please let me know. Please put something in the comments to let me know about what you know about decisions and how you make decisions. And by doing so, you'll get this video on the algorithm, and other people can get the help that they need. So I hope and wish that you're having a fantastic and beautiful day. And I'm so grateful that you shared this time with me, and I hope it helps. And I'm sending out thoughts and love and light to everyone listening. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. I am offering a drawing for a free coaching for 1 hour. If you place a review for my book on Amazon, place a review for the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and also follow me on Instagram at _reality_revolution. And I will put you in a drawing, and I will draw one person every month, and we will get a full hour, and I will help coach you in any way, shape, or form, no matter what your situation. So if you're interested, do those things, and I will announce it on this podcast. In any case, thank you so much. And welcome to the Reality Revolution.